This is Nightly Business Report with Tyler Matheson and Sue Herrera.
Flag flap. Major retailers pull items with the Confederate flag from their shelves in the wake of the shooting in South Carolina. Do businesses have a social responsibility when it comes to lightning rod issues? Boomerang buyers. The housing crash took their homes, but now they're back. Could this wave of buyers help the housing market? And beneficial bacteria, how one company is using germs to help you replace your bath products. All that and more tonight on Nightly Business Report for Tuesday, June 23rd. Good evening, everyone, and welcome. I'm Sue Herrera. Tyler is on assignment, but we'll be hearing from him just a little bit later in the program. We begin tonight with a political hot potato that is spilling over into the business world. In the aftermath of the South Carolina church shooting last week and intensifying national debate over the Confederate flag, some of the nation's biggest retailers have removed items containing that flag's image. Courtney Reagan has more.
Many in southern U.S. states still point to the Confederate flag as a symbol of the South. It's on government-issued license plates flown over state capitals and emblazoned on T-shirts and belt buckles. But after the racially targeted tragedy in Charleston, South Carolina, the controversy over the flag has been reignited, and retailers are among those responding. It's not always so easy for retailers to pull one lever to change merchandise quickly, particularly as more retailers tailor assortments to cater to different communities, meaning inventory can vary from store to store. Still, Walmart, Sears, eBay, Amazon.com, and Etsy.com have decided to stop selling and prohibit marketplace sellers from offering Confederate flag merchandise. Ahead of Amazon's decision, more than 29,000 results came up when searching Confederate flag on the site, and sales had been spiking. According to Amazon's Movers and Shakers page, one Confederate flag sales had increased more than 3,600% in 24 hours. No Target, Dollar General, Dollar Tree, Family Dollar, or JCPenney stores sell any Confederate flag-related products. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Courtney Reagan.
So, do businesses and organizations have a social responsibility when it comes to the goods and services they offer to the public? Karen Brenner joins us, clinical professor of business at New York University's Stern School of Business. Karen, thank you very much for joining us tonight. And I guess that is the heart of the issue. Do these businesses have a social responsibility?
Yes, businesses don't operate in isolation. They operate in civil society. Society gives them a license to operate by making certain concessions and accommodations to businesses. And they employ large numbers of people, affect large numbers of communities all across the globe. So they are a part of civil society, and how they go about doing their business, how they create goods and services, and how they market those services has a huge impact on society. And so it's not at all surprising that in the wake of this tragedy, the politicians have rallied very swiftly, and the retailers have rallied to make changes that probably should have been made quite a long time ago.
A number of the companies, as a matter of fact, all of the companies that Courtney mentioned in her report are publicly traded companies. Does that have anything to do with their decision, do you think? Are they held to a different standard because they've sold their shares to the public, to shareholders?
Not necessarily, but I think that makes them more visible, and so the actions that consumers take, and consumers can be a very powerful force, as we saw today, as certain retailers started the day with this decision, and other retailers were a little bit more reluctant and emerged over the course of the day to support the decision to eliminate sales of products with Confederate flags. So the pressure that can be brought to bear by consumers through social media, as well as by the media and non-governmental organizations beyond regulators or even investors, is great, and certainly it is particularly acute for public companies.
Mm-hmm. You know, the other issue that has been talked about extensively for the past few years is the use of the Redskins trademark and logo. Does that fall into this same particular category, or is that discussion different?
Well, it may get create some momentum in that conversation because of what's happened, frankly, so swiftly with respect to the Confederate flag. Unfortunately, in the heels of a tragedy, this is what's emerged. It's a positive thing that's emerged. It's unfortunate that it's through a crisis. But these are opportunities to seize moments to eliminate symbols that are divisive or offensive. And I think the decision in the case of the flag and the Confederate flag is a good one. And it may provide some momentum to these other conversations where we have symbols that are offensive to certain groups.
It also comes on the heels, does it not, of that Supreme Court decision talking about states having leeway in terms of what are put on license plates?
Exactly right. Exactly right.
All right. Karen, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Karen Brenner with New York University's Stern School of Business.
Thank you.
On to Greece now, where the government sits down with creditors tomorrow to try and finalize a bailout agreement that will unlock 7 billion euros in aid so that country can pay its debt over the summer. Details of the possible agreement are leaking out, and many in Greece are unhappy. Michelle Caruso-Cabrera is in Athens with more.
Another round of protests in Athens today, this time retirees who fear they will face cuts to their monthly pensions. The government's offer to creditors isn't public yet, but leaked copies show that it includes higher taxes on businesses, the wealthy, the middle class, and hiking the sales tax to 23% on many more products and services. Harry Theoharis is a member of parliament.
Unfortunately, any deal done under this pressure, it's not going to be a good deal for Greece, so it's only going to kick the can down the road for a few months until we actually have a deal that solves the problems that Greece has, which are structural. It's not about fiscal austerity, which is going to be where this deal is going to put the weight on.
Economists argue Greece doesn't need more taxes, but rather major changes in the way the economy functions, such as eliminating the mountainous red tape that makes it much harder to operate a business, collecting the taxes that are already owed, and shrinking the massive public sector. But changes like that take time, something Greece doesn't have. It needs bailout money, and soon, so it can pay back the International Monetary Fund and the European Central Bank this summer. As details of the proposal emerge, the country's Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras faces criticism for failing to deliver on his election promise, an end to austerity. Yale political science professor Stathis Kalivas says there is a silver lining, though. After going through 4 governments in 5 years, there are no parties left that can make that same undeliverable promise.
Everyone, with the exception of the fringe parties, the neo-Nazis and others, everyone will have been tried at the government helm, and so they won't have the opportunity as opposition to claim they're going to do things that they cannot possibly do. They're not going to have the excuse anymore.
Don't tell that to these pensioners who defend the fact that the average retirement age of a government worker is currently 56. Private sector workers 60, something that is likely to change in an effort to lower the cost of the pension system. This former bank worker says many of his colleagues retired at the age of 55.
55 sounds very young to retire.
For women, I cannot say that, because the most of the women in Greece work in a very hard environment.
Which boss can keep somebody to work 65 years old? Everybody's are looking for new people.
The next 48 hours could be decisive. There are a whole series of meetings where the leaders of the other European countries, those are Greece's creditors, look over the plan submitted by the Greeks and decide whether or not they've made enough concessions to get the bailout money they need to keep paying their bills this summer. Just as this government is being criticized for the concessions that it's making, those leaders as well face criticism back in their home countries. Why do their taxpayers have to foot the bill for the Greeks once again? For Nightly Business Report, Michelle Caruso-Cabrera, Athens.
Sales of newly built homes rose to the highest level since the recession last month, a sign that the market is building steam. The Commerce Department says new home sales rose by 2.2%, the biggest increase in 7 years. This as April sales also surged, showing continuous progress. And since the housing boom and bust of the last decade, nearly 8 million Americans have lost their homes to foreclosure. For some, enough time has now passed to become homeowners again, and these so-called boomerang buyers could help drive demand over the next few years. Diana Olick has the story.
The Cano family lost their Florida home to foreclosure in 2007.
Back in 2007, when the credit market crashed, I basically ended up jobless, and things changed.
So they relocated to Atlanta and to a rental home. Now, 7 years later, their credit repaired, they are shopping for a home once again. Not because they love home ownership, but because the math works.
I'm better off owning because it's much cheaper than actually going out and renting a comparable place based on the space that we need.
Lenders require 7 years after a foreclosure and 4 years after a short sale for buyers to be potentially eligible for credit again. So now about 700,000 borrowers are eligible for credit this year, and up to 2.2 million will be over the next 5 years, according to TransUnion. From a credit perspective, they're good to go. That is, if they want to.
Once you've had a bad experience with something or you've had a difficulty with something, it may make you reluctant to want to do it. Or maybe they found a different way of living somewhere, whether it be renting or something else that makes them more comfortable.
Of the 1.3 million consumers who have now repaired their credit, less than half have purchased another home, according to TransUnion.
There are a multitude of reasons for that. High rents are keeping potential buyers from saving for that down payment. Some have other credit issues beyond the foreclosure, and some just plain don't like the idea of home ownership anymore. Even the Canoses aren't exactly loving the idea.
It was definitely a life-changing experience to lose your house, but like he said, when you go back to saying about most people wanted to own a home because that was always the American dream kind of thing, and then now, it's more of a financial decision.
Put it up on the shelf with the other ones.
It remains to be seen how much these potential buyers will add to the housing market. That is, whether the math outweighs the fear of jumping into home ownership again. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Diana Olick in Washington.
That housing data and optimism over a possible Greek deal initially lifted stocks, but the gains faded a bit, ending in slight gains. In the end, the Dow gained 24 points, the Nasdaq added 6, but that was enough for another record close. The S&P 500 tacked on a point. An update now on President Obama's trade push. In a procedural vote, the Senate okayed a move to limit the debate on the president's fast-track negotiating authority, pushing the package very close to completion. The deal, which is an effort to strengthen ties with Asia, still faces hurdles. A separate key bill giving assistance to workers displaced by any trade accord faces a critical procedural vote as well tomorrow. Also in Washington, while the White House is set to release new rules tomorrow, which will no longer stop families of American hostages from paying ransoms. The Obama administration plans to sign an executive order and create a new office that will work with these families. However, the country's policy against making concessions to terrorists will remain the same. Boeing has a new chief. The Dow component announcing late today that its board has elected Dennis Muhlenberg to succeed current CEO Jim McNerney Jr. beginning July 1st. McNerney has held that position for the past 10 years, while Muhlenberg has served as chief operating officer since 2013, but has been with the aircraft maker for some 30 years. A lawsuit filed in Illinois accuses Boeing of building airplanes that have ventilated the cabin with toxic fumes. And now some of those who claim the fumes caused them to pass out want Boeing to fix thousands of planes to ensure the air is clean. Phil LeBeau has more.
The lawsuit accusing Boeing of having faulty ventilation in its airplanes stems from a 2013 Alaska air flight where 4 flight attendants got sick, including 3 who passed out.
The next thing I knew, I was on the galley floor, and the other flight attendant was on the PA system, just mumbling incoherently. I got on that flight, I was healthy, I got off the flight, and I have never been the same since.
Woods and the other flight attendants say they were breathing toxic fumes because of the way Boeing has ventilated thousands of airplanes for decades. At issue is the bleed air system, which pulls outside air into the cabin through the plane's engines. That air goes through mixers and filters to ensure it's suitable to breathe. But attorneys for the flight attendants say the bleed air can become toxic if a seal inside the engine leaks and burning oil or other chemicals mix with the cabin air.
We know that Boeing has known this problem exists since the early 1950s.
They've known there's a problem. They know there's fume events. They know that contaminants come in through the bleed air.
Boeing is not commenting on the lawsuit, but it's heard complaints about the safety of cabin air for years. In the past, the company has said cabin air is safe to breathe. Research has consistently shown that cabin air meets health and safety standards and that contaminant levels are generally low. The flight attendants are asking Boeing to reimburse them for their medical expenses. They also want the company to put air quality sensors in thousands of airplanes to warn crews if toxic fumes are bleeding into the cabin. And they want Boeing to stop using the bleed air system in future airplanes. Right now, just one Boeing model, the 787 Dreamliner, does not use the bleed air system for ventilating cabins. Phil LeBeau, Nightly Business Report, Chicago.
Healthcare is one of the best performing sectors so far this year. So when we come back, we'll take a deep dive into whether that run can continue. Healthcare stocks have been leading the market this year, leaving some to wonder if that trend can continue. Morgan Brennan checks up on the sector to see if the rally has run its course.
Healthcare stocks are outperforming the broader market, up 11% this year versus a 3% gain for the S&P 500. Earnings growth, increased R&D productivity, mergers, and strong demand for care are driving the heady returns. And if history is any indicator, that will continue this summer. Data firm Kensho says over the past decade, from June through August, healthcare averaged a 3% increase, far outpacing the 0.25% rise logged by the S&P. Biotech has been a bright spot, and despite talk of a bubble brewing, market analysts expect that to continue.
We definitely see upside here. We have a very strong long-term trend in biotech, and there's nothing in the technicals to suggest that that trend is exhausted in any way. In fact, it's actually accelerating as we move forward.
Morningstar healthcare analyst Damian Conover says several factors are boosting drug makers.
A lot of these firms really hit a nice inflection point in their pipelines, looking at areas of unmet medical need, areas where there's really no medicine out there. So any sort of drug that the biotechs bring into that space is, one, received very, very favorably by the regulatory agency, and two, has very strong pricing power.
M&A activity has become a huge driver as well. According to Dealogic, in 2015, healthcare in general has, for the third year running, racked up the most deals value-wise. That's helped biotech, but also managed care stocks, which are soaring as Anthem tries to buy Cigna and Aetna reportedly makes a bid for Humana.
A lot of these firms need increased scale to deal with the new healthcare reform and some of the lasting impacts that that is having on that sector. So as these firms need to negotiate with the other players within the healthcare supply chain, the scale really helps them do that effectively.
But healthcare also faces some headwinds, most notably from the Supreme Court, which will soon rule on whether to eliminate federal insurance subsidies, a move that could triple premiums for millions of Americans. Analysts say if that happens, healthcare stocks could sell off, but they don't expect that to last long. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Morgan Brennan.
Netflix announces a 7-for-1 stock split, and that's where we begin tonight's market focus. The video streaming company says the split will come in the form of a dividend of 6 additional shares for each outstanding share. The dividend is payable on July 14th to stock owners of record at the July 2nd close. Shares shot up initially in after-hours trading. Before the close, the stock was up a fraction to $681.19. Facebook is now worth more than Walmart, one of the world's largest retailers. The social media giant is valued at nearly $240 billion, pushing Walmart out of the top 10 largest companies by market cap in the S&P 500. The retailer has not finished a year outside of the top 10 S&P 500 companies by market cap since 1997. Shares of Facebook popped almost 4% today to $87.88. Walmart closed a fraction lower to $72.57. BlackBerry's results missed on both the top and bottom lines. Its technology and software licensing revenue, however, jumped from a year earlier, and profit margins were also better. than expected. CEO John Chen is optimistic about growth.
I think this is a business. We think we could make money on the phone. We have a couple of new phones coming out towards the end of this calendar year, and we'll see. We're bullish on it.
Well, nonetheless, shares of the smartphone maker tumbled more than 4% to $8.81. It was the opposite story for Darden. The parent of the Olive Garden and other restaurant chains beat analysts' estimates and also says it's planning on spinning off its real estate assets into a real estate investment trust or a REIT. It will then lease back most of the properties involved. Shares were up a penny to $69.39. Syngenta has once again rejected Monsanto's $45 billion takeover offer. The pesticide maker is saying the bid undervalues its business and cited regulatory concerns, among other things. Monsanto fell more than 1% to $112.78. Syngenta was off a fraction to $86.19. Entrepreneurs from all over have descended on Los Angeles to attend the second CNBC and Inc. magazine Iconic Conference. Tyler Matheson is there, and he tells us this time it's all about company branding.
Thanks very much. I've spent the day at Iconic 15, which is the second stop on our Iconic tour, where we celebrate and try and teach entrepreneurs and financiers about the entrepreneurial ecosystem in the country. Today's discussion largely about the power of branding and what brands mean and stand for. And of all the brands out there, one really does stand out in the domain registry area, and that is one you probably know, GoDaddy, known for its advertising that from time to time pushes the envelope. We asked the founder of GoDaddy, Bob Parsons, about his advertising and what he thinks of it.
Bad advertising is like a fat guy at a party, you know? He doesn't offend anybody, he's always smiling, but he doesn't get any action. Right. Good advertising is always controversial.
So the advertising for GoDaddy, if anything, too mild, says founder Bob Parsons, a colorful character who pushed the envelope with his branding message. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Ty. Coming up, replacing soap with bacteria? We're going to show you one company trying to do just that, coming up next. Here's what to watch for tomorrow. The final read on first quarter gross domestic product, the broadest measure of economic activity, is out. Progress at tomorrow's Eurogroup meeting on the Greek debt crisis could be a market-moving event. And more housing data with weekly mortgage applications and earnings from homebuilder Lennar. And that is what to watch tomorrow. New York has fined 4 makers of liquid nicotine used in electronic cigarettes over packaging that is easy for children to open. The firms must pay a combined $95,000 and show proof that poison-proof packaging is in development. It's all part of a law enacted last year requiring these child-resistant containers. And finally tonight, just imagine ditching your deodorant for a can of spray-on bacteria. Well, now scientists and companies are using the trillions of organisms that live on us to help deal with what's going on inside us. Meg Terrell has more.
Therese Lachelle is a self-proclaimed germaphobe, but the 50-year-old San Francisco area resident says 3 months ago that all changed.
I just like the idea of something that's natural and you're not using artificial or chemicals. I'm really a big fan of that. I just really want to use natural products.
Every day for the last 3 months, Therese has spritzed herself with live bacteria. Made by Cambridge, Massachusetts startup AOBiome, the mist contains ammonia-oxidizing bacteria, what the company calls AOBs. AOBiome says this can help users cut back on soaps, deodorants, and shampoos.
The company's hypothesis is that humans evolved with AOBs as a natural component of our skin, and really only in the last 50 years, really with the advent of sort of cleaning and new sort of hygiene routines and antibacterial products, we've lost AOBs from our skin and also lost a key sort of regulatory element from our skin microbiome.
AOBiome is one of many companies targeting the microbiome, the trillions of microorganisms that live in and on us. Research has shown those many bugs have huge implications for our health, from regulating our immune system to affecting our metabolism. Sunny Bates also uses the AOBiome spray. She says it's helped her cut out deodorant.
When people hear the word bacteria, it's not necessarily a good thing. You know, they're like, oh, good bacteria. How can bacteria be good? And in fact, it can be great.
AOBiome says it has thousands of customers using its spray, which costs $99 for a 1-month supply. It was back-ordered for several months after it was featured in the New York Times Magazine last year.
I think in general, people are looking at the world around us and wondering why we've had more and more lotions and potions, and we have continued to have more and more health problems, whether it's skin or other things that are related.
AOBiome is testing the spray for acne and other skin problems as well. Its motto, bacteria is the new black. Wear it every day. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Meg Terrell.
And that does it for Nightly Business Report for tonight. I'm Sue Herrera. Thanks for watching, and we will see you right back here tomorrow.